I was lucky enough to have a lot of work, you know,
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer is what's for you is for you.
Michael B. Jordan gets candid about his split from Lori Harvey and sets the record straight about whether he's swiping through the dating apps.
No kidding. Michael B. Jordan is one of Hollywood's most eligible bachelors. He's handsome, accomplished, and, from everything the public sees, grounded and thoughtful about the life he's built. So why then is his relationship status still undefined? Sure, it takes more than being accomplished to make a good partner, but still, many supporters can't help but wonder why there isn't a wife, or at least a long-term partner we can point to and say, this is it. But the answer isn't as simple as people expect. Because when you look a little closer, this isn't really a story about someone avoiding love. It's a story about timing, ambition, privacy, and the kind of life that doesn't always leave room for everything at once. Let's find out why exactly Michael B. Jordan doesn't have a wife. The making of a star. Michael B. Jordan just won an Oscar, and everyone can't stop talking about him. But before he became the face people associate with Hollywood success and quiet confidence, his life was rooted in something much simpler: family. He was born into a close-knit household, raised by parents who were present, involved, and intentional about how their children grew up. His mother, Donna Jordan, worked in education, and his father, Michael A. Jordan, worked in catering. It wasn't a flashy upbringing, but it was stable, structured, and grounded in discipline. It's a foundation that shows up even in the way he carries himself even now. He's measured, respectful, and never too far removed from where he started. What's interesting is that acting wasn't necessarily the original plan. Michael started out doing modeling and commercials as a child, almost by chance. It wasn't framed as some grand dream at the time. It was simply an opportunity that gradually opened doors. But once those doors opened, he stepped through them with a focus that would eventually define his career. His early roles came in small but meaningful ways. Shows like The Wire gave him visibility, even if he wasn't the center of attention yet. He had a presence that people noticed, and the best part was that it wasn't loud or forced, just natural. From there, he moved into other television roles, steadily building experience and credibility in an industry where many young actors fade out before they find their footing. But the real shift came with Fruitvale Station. That role didn't just put him on the map, it changed how people saw him. It demanded vulnerability, emotional depth, and a willingness to sit in uncomfortable truths. And he delivered in a way that made it clear he wasn't just another actor trying to make it. He was serious about the craft. From that point on, his career accelerated. By the time he stepped into Creed, everything about him had sharpened. The physical transformation alone became part of the conversation. The discipline, the training, the attention to detail, it all contributed to an image that audiences couldn't ignore. And it was at this point that people began to see him more than just another good-looking actor. He became the actor everyone wanted a piece of. Because it wasn't just that he was talented, it was the combination of things. The work ethic, the physical presence, the quiet confidence. He wasn't trying too hard to be seen, and that in itself made people look. Then came his role in Black Panther. Even as a villain, there was no denying that there simply was something compelling about the way he carried the character. It wasn't just strength, it was complexity, intensity, and emotion all at once. And for many people watching, that was the moment he crossed from being respected to being desired. By the time People magazine named him Sexiest Man Alive in 2020, it didn't feel random. It felt like a natural progression of everything he had been building for years. Not just the physical transformation, but the image. The disciplined, focused, and aura that screamed he was just out of reach enough to remain intriguing. But what often gets overlooked in that transformation is what is required. Because while his public image was growing, while he was becoming this symbol of success and attractiveness, his personal life was still operating in the background. Quiet, private, not neglected, but not prioritized in the same way his career was. And Michael has acknowledged that, in his own way. There have been moments where he's hinted at how much of himself he poured into becoming who he is now. The long hours, the back-to-back projects, the constant pressure to deliver. That kind of pace doesn't leave much room for building something steady with another person. Not because it's impossible, but because it demands a level of presence that his career didn't always allow. So when people look at him now, at the success, the recognition, it's easy to assume everything else should have fallen into place alongside it. But that's not really how his story was built. Before the attention, before the headlines about his love life, there was a period of becoming, a period where the focus was almost entirely on the work, on proving himself, on building something that would last. And when your life starts that way, relationships don't always grow at the same pace as everything else. Dating in the spotlight. For someone as visible as Michael, his love life has always been surprisingly quiet. Not empty, just very private. And in Hollywood, it's not something we see very often. But like we said, his relationships have been private, not completely non-existent. And that's an important distinction, because from early on, Michael made a very deliberate choice to keep his relationships out of the spotlight. Not because there was nothing to show, but because he understood what that kind of exposure could do. Still, over the years, a few relationships, or at least rumored ones, found their way into public conversation. One of the earliest names linked to him was Teyana Taylor. The two were said to have dated briefly when they were younger, before either of them became who they are now. Although it wasn't a highly public relationship, there's very little confirmed detail about what they were like together. Even then, there was a pattern forming. Michael kept things low, almost intentionally out of reach. Interestingly, the rumor mills about them are once again starting to churn. Then came rumors linking him to Kiki Lane, his co-star in If Beale Street Could Talk. Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable, and naturally, people wondered if it extended beyond the film. But again, nothing was ever confirmed. If there was anything there, it stayed private, unspoken, and untouched by public narrative, the way Michael seemed to prefer it. There were also whispers about him and Ashlyn Castro. This was one of the few times he was actually seen with someone in a more casual, real-world setting, traveling, spending time together, looking like a couple. But even then, he never addressed it publicly. No interviews, no confirmations, no denials and silence. But for many people, that silence said a lot. Because at one point, Michael openly admitted that he wasn't sure he could handle a fully public relationship. He spoke about wanting to protect that part of his life, especially while he was still growing into himself and his career. According to him, there's a level of scrutiny that comes with being in the public eye, and he didn't seem eager to invite that into something as personal as love. So if you look at these early connections, a pattern kind of starts to emerge. He dates quietly, he connects cautiously, and most importantly, he protects. Not just the relationship, but himself and his partner within it. And maybe that's why, for a long time, it felt like there was a distance between Michael and the idea of a public romance. Like he was always holding something back, keeping one foot outside of the spotlight, even as his fame continued to grow. But then, something shifted, because eventually, he stepped into a relationship that felt different from everything that came before. a relationship he didn't hide, one he didn't keep quiet, one that people could actually see. And for the first time, it felt like Michael wasn't just protecting love. It felt like he was ready to live in it. That relationship was with Lori Harvey. And when it began, it didn't just catch attention. It changed the conversation entirely. The Lori Harvey chapter. When Michael and Lori Harvey went public with their relationship in early 2021, it didn't feel like just another celebrity pairing. It felt intentional. Whether it was because up until that point, Michael had built a reputation for keeping his personal life guarded or something else, the shift was noticeable almost immediately. Unlike his previous romantic affiliations, this one wasn't a rumor or a quiet sighting. This was a decision clearly made to be seen. They confirmed their relationship through social media, sharing photos that felt curated but still personal. It wasn't excessive, but it was enough to signal something new. Birthdays, vacations, quiet moments. For the first time, people were getting a glimpse into what his life looked like when he wasn't on set. And what stood out wasn't the ease of it all. There was a softness to him in that relationship that people hadn't really seen before. He seemed more open, more relaxed, less guarded. Even in interviews, there was a subtle shift. He spoke about being in a place where he was finally ready to prioritize love in a way he hadn't before. At one point, he admitted that he had reached a stage in his life where he was more comfortable sharing parts of himself publicly, including his relationship. That alone said a lot, considering how private he had been for years. And it wasn't just talk. He made gestures that people noticed. For Lori's birthday, he rented out an entire aquarium, creating an intimate, almost surreal experience. It wasn't loud or performative in the usual celebrity way, but thoughtful and deliberate, like the kind of gesture that suggested real effort. From the outside, it looked steady, even though some people suggested it was rushed and a little too chaotic. For many others, they were just two people who seemed aligned. But Lori had her own history, or at least the version of it that the public had already decided on. Before her relationship with Michael, Lori had been linked to a few high-profile names, and over time, that turned into a narrative. Not always fair or accurate, but always persistent. She was often described as someone who moved on quickly, someone who dated freely. And in a space like the internet, that quickly became a label. But the truth is, most of what people thought they knew about her came from observation, not confirmation. Short relationships, public appearances, social media moments, all pieced together into a story that followed her, whether she addressed it or not. So when she and Michael became official, there was this lingering sense that it wouldn't last in many minds. For others, though, she was finally settling down, and that tension between who she was and who people believed her to be quietly sat in the background of their relationship from the very beginning. Which is why, when the breakup happened in 2022, it felt half unexpected and half expected. There wasn't a dramatic announcement or long explanation, just reports that the relationship had ended. According to sources close to them, they were in different places in their lives. Michael was said to be more ready for something long-term, while Lori was still figuring things out for herself. And just like that, it was over. Neither of them spoke publicly in detail about what went wrong. There were no interviews dissecting the relationship, no public back and forth. Just a quiet separation, handled with the same privacy that had once defined the beginning of his dating life. Still, there were small glimpses of how it affected him. In the months that followed, Michael appeared more reflective in interviews. He spoke about growth, about learning, about understanding himself better. At one point, he described being in a phase where he was focusing on healing and moving forward. without rushing into anything new. There was no attempt to rewrite the narrative or minimize what the relationship had been. If anything, it seemed like he took it seriously, like it mattered enough to step back afterward and reassess. For many people watching from the outside, that relationship had felt like a turning point. The moment where everything aligned: career, timing, openness. The moment where it seemed like he might actually settle down. And when it ended, it left behind a different kind of question. Not just why didn't it work, but what does it actually take for something to last in a life like his? Because if a relationship like that, visible, intentional, and seemingly stable, could come to an end, then maybe the answer isn't as simple as finding the right person. Maybe it's something deeper. What Michael actually said about love. By the time you get past the headlines, the speculation, and even the relationships themselves, what stands out most about Michael is how carefully he speaks about love. He's never been the kind of person to turn his personal life into a running commentary. In fact, at one point, he admitted that his love life is the subject he's least excited to talk about publicly. And that alone tells you it's not that it doesn't matter to him, but that he doesn't see it as something to be performed or explained on demand. Still, in the moments where he has opened up, a clearer picture starts to form. One of the most honest things he's said is surprisingly simple. Timing matters more than people think. He once explained that you can meet the right person and still have it not work out. Not because anything is wrong, but because the timing isn't aligned. And for someone whose life has been as fast-moving and demanding as his, that idea feels less like an excuse and more like a reality. Because what does right timing even look like for someone like him? A schedule that's constantly shifting, months spent on set, away from home. The pressure to stay at the top of his career. Those aren't small factors. They shape how relationships begin, how they grow, and sometimes how they end. He's also been very honest about how different dating becomes once you're in the public eye. In his 2018 interview with GQ, he talked about something most people don't consider: the early stages of getting to know someone. The normal parts. Think meeting casually, spending time without pressure, and figuring out if there's even something there at all. For him, that process is complicated, because even the simplest outing can turn into something observed, photographed, and interpreted. And when that happens, it changes the dynamic before it even has a chance to develop naturally. He put it plainly, that part of dating is tough. And then there's the part of him that still feels deeply connected to where he came from. His family. During an interview on the red carpet at the Critics' Choice Awards, Michael was asked about his love life, especially since he had his mother by his side that night. His answer was light, but it revealed something important. If you don't pass the mom test, it kind of stops right there. It was said casually, almost like a joke. But for someone like Michael, who grew up in a tight-knit home, relationships aren't just about chemistry or timing. They're about alignment with his life, his values, and the people closest to him. Bringing someone into that space means something. It's not casual, even if the relationship itself is still developing. And that might explain another detail he shared, that his longest relationship has lasted just over a year. For some people, that might seem short, but in the context of everything else, his career, his privacy, the pressure, it all starts to make more sense. It's not necessarily about an inability to commit, but more so about how many things have to line up for a relationship to last in his world. And maybe that's the thread running through everything he's said. Not that love isn't important, or he's avoiding it, but that it is complicated in ways people don't always see. Because from the outside, it's easy to assume that someone like Michael has endless options, endless opportunities to find something real. But from his perspective, the challenge isn't access. It's authenticity, finding something genuine in a space where almost everything is visible, building something stable in a life that's constantly moving, and doing all of that without losing the parts of himself he's worked so hard to protect. So when people ask why he isn't married yet, or why his relationships haven't lasted longer, his own words point to something deeper than a simple answer. It's not just about who you meet. It's about when you meet them, and whether your life allows that connection to grow into something more. Plus, that mom test comment wasn't just a throwaway line. Think of it as a glimpse into how seriously he takes the idea of bringing someone into his life. Because for him, it's not just about finding a partner. It's about finding someone who fits into the world he's built, including the people who have been there from the beginning. And that adds another layer to everything. Because now, it's not just about timing or privacy. It's about compatibility on a deeper level. Someone who understands his life. Someone who can exist within it without being overwhelmed by it. And at the same time, someone who feels real enough to build something lasting with. But outside of that, there's another kind of pressure, one that doesn't come from family, but from the public. The expectation. At a certain point, people stop asking if someone will get married and start asking why they haven't. And for someone like Michael, that question comes up often. And sometimes those questions say more about what people expect than what's actually true. Because the reality is, he's still relatively young. His life is still evolving. His career is still expanding in ways that require time, energy, and focus. And based on everything he's said, he's not someone who wants to enter into something serious unless it feels right. What are your thoughts on this? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.